To A People's Guide to Publishing. I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing and Distribution. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 25 years.
I'm Ellie Blue. I'm the editorial and marketing director here at Microcosm. We are an independent mid-list publisher based in Portland, Oregon. We have 14 employees, over 650 titles in print with 20 to 40 new books per year, and we distribute thousands of titles from other publishers.
We started this podcast so that we can share what we've learned with newer publishers so that you can learn from our mistakes.
Or maybe you just want to understand the publishing industry.
This week, we are going to answer a reader question, which is, how do you know what a distributor specializes in? Oh. Great question, reader.
Good follow-up for our last episode.
Mm-hmm. And which is actually what they asked it in response to. Believe it or not. And I said, yeah, you would think that would not be difficult. But in fact it is. How would you answer this question?
Well, I would turn to my network and I would ask the most knowledgeable person I know, which is you.
No. Well, they did too, so they did great.
And I mean, I do feel like that's part of the problem, though, which is that, like, publishing is so hard to get into, in part because these things are so opaque. And you have to know somebody in order to know anything. I
know. I mean, in that way, it's like stock trading, where you, like, more or less have to know what to Google, and there aren't directories of these things as much as, and the ones that you do find are severely outdated, you know.
So that's why we do this podcast.
It is. And so in part, you know, we have an episode about this if you go back about a year or so. Actually, we have a number of episodes about distributors and distribution. But so there is a big difference between a specialty wholesaler, which sells books passively, you know, like, for example, like Diamond Comics, or New Leaf sells, like, Mind, Body, Spirit, you know, new age books in a similar fashion, but they don't have salespeople that go door to door. They say, here is our catalog. Let me know if you'd like to place an order, you know. And, you know, so it's a bit different in that way.
So we're talking about trade distributors?
Yeah, so a trade distributor would be distinguished by having a sales force. They would actively go and sell. And most distributors do have, I guess it's important to say, the presumption of seeking a general audience, whatever that may be. So, you know, they sell as many biographies of Bill Clinton as they do, you know, like the My Vag coloring book, or you know, things that are
Excel for Dummies.
Mm-hmm, like hyper specific versus hyper general. But you will see things like patterns in their catalogs, and that really has to do with where they excel. So then when they're good at something, that tends to result in more publishers that produce that kind of subject matter going to them for distribution. And so, you know, for example, Independent Publishers Group was they created a arm of their business called Trafalgar Square, which specializes in importing British books from Big Five houses into the United States. So you would think that would sound like hyper specialized, like there wouldn't be a market for that. But what happened is, you know, they brought Banksy to the United States, you know, and those books, you know, there used to be these teeny tiny little Banksy books, those first 3 or 4, and then, you know, so then that got them a corner into the museum market. It got them a corner into selling, like, art books. It got them into a corner into politics, you know, things like that. Versus, like, Consortium is a bit edgier. You know, they have a lot of books that are left of center. They have a lot of cool graphic novel publishers. They have, you know, sort of a solid leg in a number of arenas, and you would think of them as being, like, respectable but quirky, you know. And you know, similarly in the like PGW would be more of a, like, establishment literary presses, you know, things that are a little bit, you know, like, I guess I would think of a signature book as being that the book about the woman from the Northwest who went and hung out in the South to learn about like why Southern voters had shifted to support Trump prior to that. That kind of, it's like an NPR sort of set,
So how do you tell, like, how can an outsider or a newcomer to publishing tell what a distributor's specialty is?
So the key way is to look at their catalog and see what they have a lot of and see what they have very little of.
And how do you get their catalog?
So the best way would be in the People's Guide to Publishing book, there is a list of trade distributors. And there's also a list of wholesalers and weird kind of sub-distributors. And you would go and Google them and find their websites, and then you will be able to find, it'll be like, look at our spring catalog, and then you can click on that, and then like 2 hours later, the PDF will load that has like 300 pages, and it's like, okay, so they have a lot of books about sports.
That's pretty daunting. But you can also see what they don't have, like if they don't have any books for children, though that might just be in a different catalog.
Right, and so, yeah, you will tend to have a different children's catalog, but, if a publisher doesn't have a lot for children, that really tells you that they're not a great place to sell children's books, So if that's what you publish, you would want to find somebody that has that, and similarly...
Right, because their sales forces are like literally going to those stores and going to the children's books buyers.
And they have those appointments and they have those relationships, and it's the same way. And this is sort of the creation of the distributor model, what really goes back to the point of, the chains and the chain buyers saying, like, if you don't have at least, 5 titles per season, that this buyer who only buys religion, philosophy, and, parenting or whatever, then we don't want to meet with you. It's just not worth our time. So, and then that harkens to the power of the distributor model. But then also, if the distributor doesn't have that, then they're not much use to you either. They're just sort of selling passively at that point.
So another way to look is on Edelweiss. If you go to edelweiss.plus, it's sort of like a giant online catalog for the publishing industry, and you can create an account for free, and you can look up any book. You can look up publishers' catalogs on there, for one thing, but you can also reverse engineer it and just, like, look up books. Yeah. We have an episode a while ago about comps, like figuring out which titles are comparable and competitive to yours. Mm-hmm. And if you look up the comps, then you'll see at the top of the Edelweiss listing, on the left, there will be the publisher, and on the right, there will be the distributor. So that can give you a starting point.
Yeah, and that's a good way to approach it, too, because that'll give you deeper depth than the public really thinks about with publishing, because it'll show you what is sold alongside what, and that will reveal also why certain books sink or swim.
If you've been doing your competition research, which I hope you have.
Which you have, because you are a good listener.
Then you also maybe have a sense of what publishers are most similar to you. And if you go to those publishers' websites and you go to the part of their website that's like how to buy our books, you can often see who their distributors are. And like often that's very enlightening. Like, maybe they have a gift distributor that you never thought of even looking for.
Yeah. And so you should know also that, for a independent trade distributor, you really want to lean on their strengths, not their weaknesses. Whereas with like a big 5 house, most big 5 houses also do supplemental distribution, and even some big indies do supplemental distribution. You can be sold, actually very few publishers. I think it's like literally 4 publishers are sold by Chronicle Books, and maybe 3 are sold by Workman, 2 of which are owned by Workman now. But you can go to those companies to be sold by them if they feel that your offering makes their offering stronger. But like the big 5 houses, it's a little different, where they're trying to just shore up their selling capacity. So they're saying, if you can do a few $1 million a year in sales and you control a category strongly that they don't, then they would sell you, because that would increase their ability to sell other books onto that shelf. And literally, I can tell you in some cases, big 5 publishers will distribute independent presses solely on the grounds that they just added another warehouse and they can make more money by putting your books in it.
not necessarily because they can sell your books better.
Well, they don't take anybody, but they're definitely a lot more inclined to sign new publishers when they've just, added like 100,000 square feet of capacity.
Which I feel like does bring up the important point, which I'm sure we've talked about before, that like just signing on to a distributor is not a magic bullet, and in fact it can be incredibly expensive. So like be cautious when you're making your choices. Make sure that the distributor's a good fit, and also make sure that you're not just going to be like one tiny blip on a 800 million page catalog.
Yeah, and so this is also the advantage of knowing things about a distributor before you have a conversation with them, and it's not to like wow them with your research and your knowledge, it's to make better informed decisions. So you can say, like, I see that you do really well with craft books, and this is an area I'm expanding into. And so it does them better to have that information and then to help you on that development journey of making those craft books saleable, because that's like, in an ideal world, you would use your distributor also to help you develop your books, not just to complain to you when they're incapable of selling your misdeveloped books.
Oh, there's so many sad things.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be that way. It can be a happy story. Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
on Twitter at Microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at Microcosm_pub,
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.